sector and others. I co-chair this employer engagement forum with Professor Joe Ingold. And unfortunately, Joe's not very well this morning. Usually she is here and does a far better job of presenting these things, but unfortunately she's not too well. So she won't be with us today. But we've got some information about an exciting Joe Ingold related thing, which is coming up soon. But I should just say as well, my own interest in employer engagement stems from having worked within the employer engagement area of employability for quite a number of years. So I currently write strategies for organisations. I train employer engagement staff, and I've got a vested interest really in how better employer engagement can help more people into work through the programs that we run. That's my kind of real passion about this thing. So I'm very pleased to welcome you all today. I'll just give you a few messages before I bring in Henry, who's going to give us an ERSA update. And I should just say, if you're joining late and you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, please do so, because one of the things we try and do with these forums is bring together different organisations, different people working in employer engagement to form a bit of a collaborative network. Gone are the days, I hope, of people pulling up the drawbridges and looking after their vacancies like this. But what we now see in employability best practice in the UK is people actually collaborating across competitors and working together. So this is a real chance to increase your network. So do say hello in the chat, and we'll hear from you later as well. But just to mark your card about a couple of future employer engagement forums. On the 7th of March, very excitingly, Joe is launching a book on employer engagement, or more accurately, labour market activation, and the importance of employer engagement within that. Some of the people on this call and in the wider network have contributed to this book. So, and it's about what many of you do day to day. So it's really important. We should be getting a link in the chat, I hope, for that. So do come along to that. That'll be really exciting. It's a shame Joe is not here to bask in the glory of us promoting her future book launch. So that's on the 7th of March. On the 5th of March, which is a further employer engagement forum, we're also hoping to look at employer quality marks. And so I've got my first plea to this group. So not to kind of influence anyone's judgment on these things, but in the UK, it seems we've got quite a number of different types of employer quality marks, be it ban the box or disability confident or whatever charter relates to helping a certain demographic or disadvantaged group into employment. And I want to take a look at these. I want to take a look at these in terms of how they assist disadvantaged groups into work, what they mean for employers, and I think it can form part of our offer to the wider business network, but they're not without their challenges. So I would like to sort of ask people to kind of raise their hand or put in the chat whether they'd like to be part of a conversation on these employer quality marks. Partly as a kind of research bit before we do our employer engagement forum on it, but also because I don't know all of these employer quality marks. You have regional ones, there are local ones, so I'd like to get a bit of a mapping exercise and a bit of an understanding of what's out there. So if you're interested, and I appreciate that's a bit of a broad and rough brief, just put your hand up and we can have a further conversation about it. I've probably forgotten something, but I'll ask Henry to come in and give the ERSA update before we move to Miguel.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm Henry Fowkes. I'm the Public Affairs and Policy Lead at ERSA. And I'm standing in place of Elizabeth today because she's at the Work and Pension Select Committee, answering questions from MPs. And that's available to watch on Parliament.tv, which I'll be doing, and I assume everyone else will be as well. The next thing I wanted to say was the ERSA regionals are back. These are in-person meetings up and down the country. Hopefully Laura will put a link to the dates in the chat. But yeah, we really hope to see some of you there. It's a good opportunity to collaborate and interact with each other in person. Tony mentioned one of the events on the 7th that I was going to that I was going to mention, but we're also having another session, also led by Tony, on specifically around 50+ provision, and this is for ERSA members with an expertise and experience on delivering 50+ provision. But I'll leave Tony to sell that better than I will. And then just the upcoming employer engagement events will all be on Eventbrite soon, so save the date. And I look forward to hearing from Miguel today and seeing you all again soon. Thanks, Teddy.
Thanks a lot, Henry. I'll get a bit more information about that 50+ event. So many of you will be aware of the policy kind of direction of travel in the UK at the moment, and our kind of labour shortages in the UK. And there's been talk for a little while now about the kind of the great retirement and stuff like that, about lots of older workers leaving the labour force. And I think we've got an opportunity in this sector as a collective to be helping to influence government, be it our current one or potentially our future one. Not that we'll get into party politicals. But we've got the expertise in this sector, but we need to bring it together. We need to talk about what works in this space. And between Elizabeth and I, we want to gather a small group of expert organizations who have worked in the kind of older worker category. And we want to pull together the best practice. We want to pull together how the direction of travel and policy and therefore future programs should be going. And on the 7th of March, as Henry said, we're going to have a lumpy session on this. We're going to have a couple of hours or a couple of 3 hours put together to pull all of this expertise together and then push something directly to the policy leads and different government advisors. Could we just, I'm just going to, I muted myself. That was useful, wasn't it? But I was aware someone was having a lovely chat in the background there. So again, if you're interested in this space, and let's think about this again from the kind of the relationship with businesses, right? Because that's a really important factor here. How do we help businesses to engage with an older workforce? But also, if you've got colleagues, perhaps in the more in the delivery aspect, please highlight this to them. We want to get the experts around the table. Okay, so that's my plea to you. I don't know whether I did sell it, Henry, but I tried. And thank you. The link has gone in the chat there as well.
So
okay,
far better than me, Tony. So thank you.
Lovely. So I hope everyone's all right with that information. Of course, we will have this is a forum, so you will have a chance to speak as well. This is not just me speaking. But before we bring everyone else in, I'd really like to welcome Miguel. And Miguel's going to talk to us about some of his work and some of his experiences on the international scene. Miguel.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here. I'm Miguel. I work with employment services for more than 20 years now. I work for the German one. I was briefly in DWP as well, and worked for the World Association of Public Employment Services, G20. Don't want to bore you with all my CV, but what I'm saying is that I work with public and private employment services for quite a while already, and there are a couple of topics that I think are crucial to keep them relevant and successful and develop. And one of them is employer engagement. So that's why I said when Tony and Joe asked me whether I want to discuss with you that I immediately said yes, because I think it's maybe one of the most relevant, if not the most relevant topic of what employment services should be doing is to engage with employers as well and go beyond the classical focus on job seekers only. So of course, you have been talking about that topic a lot, and so I was thinking, what kind of aspects could I bring up for discussion that you that might be new to you, or that kind of might add some value to the discussion? So I thought of three, and I think that all of those three you already worked a lot on, but I'd like to maybe bring a new aspect to it. One of it is in the cooperation with employers you have, or you are looking to develop, whether you address the more empowered job seekers. I will come to that in a moment. The role of the job seekers in this whole cooperation with employers is changing, and that needs to be addressed also in the communication with employers and how you cooperate with them. Service, the second thing that I see becoming more and more important in employment services when engaging with employers is the topic of apprenticeships. I've seen that you already do a lot in that direction. Wanted to add some aspects to the discussion. And the third thing is more kind of process focus when employment services decide to engage with employers more and have something like a service to employers. How well is it integrated in the overall service portfolio? Is it just a standalone thing that they do because employment services think that they need to engage with employers, so they have one person calling up a couple of employers? Or do you integrate it fully in the service chain of your employment service? So these are the things I would like to discuss. Starting with the first one. And feel free to interrupt me whenever you like. Yeah, if I don't see where the chat is popping up or so, just chip in, interrupt me. My eyes are not working too well. Yes. So the first one is what a lot of people call empowerment of job seekers. And I think it's very easy because the labor market is changing in a way that more and more attention is shifting to skills. Job used to be the kind of currency of the labor market. Now it's skills. So many skills are sought after. There's a skills shortage. At the same time, there's also unemployment. But in many countries, in the European Union, especially, the unemployment is rather low, even after crises and after a difficult labor market situation. It's a shortage of skills rather than too many job seekers, and that kind of shifts the power a little bit. That shifts the power a little bit towards the job seeker. The job seekers are more in a position to say, "This is how I imagine my work. These are my skills. I'd like to bring that to employers. So what can employers offer me?" As opposed to this is the vacancy and we have a ton of job seekers applying for it, and then the employer can pick the best one. So the question is, in your employment services, have you addressed that well enough? My experience is that most employment services are geared towards job seekers anyway, also because of the fact that most of the job seekers they deal with are vulnerable, so they need extra holistic care. But when they deal with employers, they are very focused on the vacancies and not so much on the job seeker skills. Many employers are a little bit overwhelmed by this new way of how job seekers present themselves. They don't know how to make the jobs they offer attractive enough for getting the right job seekers. They don't know how to interview the job seekers in a way that it would also appeal to them. And they don't know how to onboard them, how to do the check-in of job seekers once they come on board. So what employment services, in my view, can do, and some of them are doing that already, is try to find a way of helping employers make themselves more attractive to job seekers, that it makes sense. And I'm not talking about multinationals with the top executive positions. I'm talking about jobs that are matchable and attractive and suitable for the cohorts, the job seekers groups you usually deal with, including vulnerable groups. Because one other aspect of course, this job seeker empowerment and the development that the digital development that the labor market is taking is that also vulnerable job seekers might have the chance to get more empowered by accessing information on the labor market that they weren't able to access before because of digital routes, and also because there is let's say, a more open mindset towards diversity than before. With all that, I think employment services need to be part of the discussion. If you like to come in here, you can. If there's something that that you'd like to comment on, how you're currently doing it, whether you have a means in place and processes within your employment services that help the employer to deal with an empowered job seeker. I'll leave a moment for you to reflect and come in on that if you like.
Feel free to unmute. No need to put your digital hand up or anything like that, you can just come in. Anyone got any reflections or comments on what Miguel said?
Miguel. Oh, sorry, Aidan.
Sorry, go on, Fiona. You go first.
No, sorry. See, you sit this long and then everybody wants to jump in. Miguel, morning. Thank you for that. I think just to add to what you're obviously discussing, here in Scotland, what we're trying to do is link in with skills academies and training providers who can offer that training to an employer. So there's a route because there is a massive skill shortage in a various of different industries, and it's tapping into that to support the employer, especially with a lot of people, especially the NHS. We've got a lot of customers coming from the NHS who've been in the NHS 30 years and they don't know what their employment looks like now, what industry they want to go into. So there is a skill set there that we can transfer those skills. However, they need to be retrained to move into a different industry. So it's looking at routeways. And I think it's going back to what we've probably done 20 years ago and when we had skill-based academies. And it's obviously not about reinventing the wheel, it's just working smarter with employers.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah, that's great. The skills-based approach, especially if it looks at skills that are transferable, that you can kind of take with you from job to job, that is a big asset, of course. And employment services that do that, I think, are quite strong in the market and have good coverage among employers also. I don't know whether you ever heard of job carving. That's a concept that a couple of employment services help with, and that's helping the employers look at what kind of jobs do you have, and are those jobs actually shaped in a way that really meets the reality? Because jobs have been profiles have been put up maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, and then never change. You'd still need the same qualifications to take people. You still want this and that kind of degree, although it doesn't really matter. So is the job really up to date and up to get the right candidates? So what some employment services do is sit down with the employer, especially if it's a small, medium-sized employer that doesn't have an HR department, doesn't have much time to look into carving vacancies, and look at what kind of job can that become. And is that not actually two jobs, or do you need to have this part really in-house, or can you outsource that? So they sit down with the employers and help them reshape a little bit their job profiles, which can open the vacancies to different kinds of skill sets, and can also help maybe get people on board that are more vulnerable, that normally wouldn't have been recruited with the old job profiles, if that makes sense. So all this goes a little bit back to the idea of human-centered design, which sounds like a big word, but in fact it means that you kind of take a chance to sit down and kind of question the old processes and redesign them from a perspective of the user.
I was going to say, Miguel, that's what we've developed. So I developed an inclusive recruitment service last year, and what the starting point of that with the employer is to provide a review of their current recruitment processes. And it's exactly that, whereas a decade or so ago, where there was more job seekers available in the jobs market, you had a situation where employers were largely putting things into the job descriptions to repel candidates. Of course, those things don't work anymore because there aren't as many candidates to repel. So it's about flipping that around and attracting candidates in. So we've taken the viewpoint of looking at breaking down the various facets within the job descriptions, looking at things like job carving and job slicing as well, removing things like degrees that aren't useful, or making things a bit more transparent. So when an employer talks about flexible working, what does that actually mean? When they talk about you need to have good English or good maths, what does that actually mean? Because for one person, it might mean level 2, linking it to the skills agenda. For another person, it might mean, well, as long as they can read a simple instruction. So it's about just being clearer around exactly what's needed, so that candidates aren't then self-selecting out, and it's actually attracting them in. So that's that's what we're currently working on.
Great to hear that's already happening. I think that that's the future. And yes, I mean, questioning things. Yeah, sorry.
Paul?
It's Paul from Australia. So there is an Australian company that designed a software system that helps big organizations that hire a lot of entry-level people to basically get by without a resume, right? They get their candidate to apply in their own words as to why they want to work there. And the AI algorithms actually sort out who's worth pursuing or not. And there's been some great case examples where in Ireland this tool was able to encourage employers to hire more people with disability because it didn't get caught up in the bias that natural recruiters actually have unconsciously in how they go about selecting candidates. So it doesn't work for all kinds of roles, but certainly it's an improvement and it helps increase the chances of people who would otherwise, because of their resume, would never get a look in. And job carving is absolutely the future for people who are looking to transfer industries or jump across to different occupations from ones they've never done before. And employers can be convinced that there is a business case here to take on someone, even if it's 10 hours a week to start with, and then build up from there. And later on, we've got plenty of examples to share with this group later on next time.
Thanks a lot. That's great.
Thanks,
and one thing you mentioned, Paul, is to using algorithms, which I think is very helpful in many ways. For example, there are a couple of employment services, Denmark, for example, and also under Scandinavian countries that use algorithms to go through vacancies and just see how are vacancies worded and how successful is that wording. And then with those insights, help the employers to see how vacancies can be worded in a different way that is more inviting and more welcoming and more likely to find the right skills. And also kind of gear them towards more vulnerable groups that might then feel more entitled and empowered to apply for it.
Miguel, if
yes.
it's okay to make a quick comment, sure. What strikes me, I think, sometimes about the whole recruitment process is that it starts with an employer who perhaps isn't necessarily that experienced or confident or competent at doing the whole kind of recruitment process. So they just find a job description off the internet and amend it. And then we talk about job carving almost as a kind of, well, let's just fix what you've done because you haven't gone through the process. Now, I remember a good few years ago, I was very lucky to go to Rotterdam and speak to some colleagues over there about how some of their principalities, they start the process with employers way before that job hits the internet, that vacancy hits the internet, and they do the job straight off and carve it immediately, right? So that they can start thinking about, well, what does this look in certain ways? But of course, the actual sort of accepted process is still to just get that possibly mismatched vacancy and job description out, and then do the try and like fit into it afterwards. It's just a reflection, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it all breaks down to what's the mindset behind it. So it's necessary to work with the mindset of the employers, also of their own staff in the employment service, to kind of have this approach that vacancies can be built from scratch already in the right way, or if they're not, then do it in a different way, and just put the whole recruitment process to the test and don't take it as a kind of given that has worked like this for years and now we still need to keep on doing it, even if the labor market is a completely different one. And for that, this kind of co-design and human-centered design principles also have this approach of bringing people around the table that would maybe not necessarily always sit around the table or are not kind of classical partners. So, for example, invite employers over, even if there is no concrete job matching at the moment, or no recruitment process at the moment, but just on a long-term basis, think how can we cooperate together, and how can we help you build vacancies, how we can help you figure out what kind of people you need, because there's also many small, medium-sized enterprises that say, I need people, but I don't know exactly what kind of people, or I know that I will need, but I don't know when. And then they come to you to firefight, and that's then already too late. So anything that has like a more proactive approach of co-designing, sitting together around the table, how can we do this together, and then try it out. And if it fails, okay, it fails, but you try it, and then next time try better. So this mentality and mindset of trial and error, and the mentality and mindset of co-designing things on a kind of equal level is something that I think needs to come to the fore now in this more empowered job seeker environment. Sorry, are there questions? I see some people popping up here.
There's a couple of hands, but I'm also aware. I think Christoph was. I'm trying to read his face. I think he was going to say something. Is that right, yeah. Christoph?
No. I could only contribute to what has been said earlier. What one of the interesting, so we do skill profiling at SkillUp. First, we started doing this for people, and then realized, oh, we need to do the same for employers because they really struggle. So like a human, if you ask someone, what are you good at, what are your skills, you need to like automate it for them. For the employers, it's the same. What are the skills you're looking for? Is a very difficult question if you don't really help them. And what we learned is that, as in for the incentives to the employers appreciate in participating, can be very simple things, such as increasing their visibility on search engines. The richer the profiles are, the richer the descriptions are, the higher their rank. All of these things can be easily measured and tracked, so to speak, because often it's just like you said earlier, Miguel, you need to explain this to the employer who's been doing the same thing for 20 years. And the moment you start presenting them with numbers and how they increase in certain performance metrics, this becomes easier, so to speak. But it's a long path, unfortunately, and we hope that the employment intermediaries help pushing this trend, so to speak.
Yes, and some more hands. Adrian.
Thanks, Christoph. Yeah, Adrian.
Yeah, just a quick comment, just reflecting on job descriptions and perhaps the usefulness of the job description itself. I mean, if we're all honest with ourselves, do we actually carry out our jobs as they are described? I know I don't. I know what I know what the expected outcomes are, but there are things within the job, and I think if a lot of us are honest, when we look at the job description for the jobs that we're in, and you speak to people, they say, well, I've kind of created my own job, or I do the job in the way that I do it, and yes, the outcomes that are expected are achieved, but they're not necessarily achieved in the way that it's outlined in a job description, and it makes me wonder how useful job descriptions actually are in some cases.
Absolutely, yeah. Kevin,
and then I suppose whether there's anything we can do to try and influence an employer's mindset on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are examples. For example, in Estonia, small country but very innovative, they do have job clubs where they, a bit like this setting here, but with employers, employment service, sometimes training institute, depends on where they want to get it. And then they discuss approaches, and they also give a kind of common image to the public. They have offices where people can come in like job seekers and kind of look for jobs. And so the employment service, the employers and training institutes present themselves together in a job club. So their own kind of company profiles, corporate identity kind of stands back behind this kind of common job club where the image is, we help you find a job, we help you skill yourself, we help you kind of get an orientation in the labor market commonly. So that's one way of changing the mindset, because all the people that you need to have working there need to have this kind of common mindset of we're doing this together. That's one approach of doing that. And another one is what we already said, that to kind of concretely work on matching on jobs, help and through that kind of change also the culture of or support the change of a culture of a company that has been recruiting in a specific way and now needs to change that to keep up to date. I'm terrible in taking this kind of people. I don't know who said it
Well,
first. Usually I have a lot of grumpy people sitting around waiting for their turn. So
yeah, but we've got to remember these are people who work in employer engagement. They're very, very happy in putting their hands up and speaking.
Yeah. I see a lot of happy faces.
We've got Craig and then Kevin, if that's all right.
Yeah. Hi, Miguel. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. I've worked in employer engagement for longer than I care to remember with some of the guys on this call as well. But I just wanted to get from an international perspective, what's your opinion in terms of employer attitudes now that we're in a unique situation whereby we're seeing labour market challenges across the globe, not just in the UK. I just wanted to get your perspective on whether employer attitudes have changed in terms of adapting their practices or adapting their policies to engage with people that are further away from the labour market. And then we'll hopefully that instigates a discussion amongst others on the call.
Yes, it is changing, I think. And not only a corporate social responsibility agenda, but also with many employers see that the more diverse their workforce is, including vulnerable groups, so-called vulnerable groups. In a way, we're all vulnerable groups, if you look at it, that they become more successful, more competitive, more ideas. So whatever the government can do to facilitate and moderate this discussion around this mindset, I think would be very helpful. And concretely, not many, but a growing number of employment services, public employment services, government representatives are helping employers to put together diversity plans, to do mentoring systems for vulnerable groups that come on board. Apprenticeships that we will be talking in a moment are a way of doing that. So any kind of structural help that can open infrastructures of employers and mindsets of employers to become more diverse workforce, I think is a kind of main role of the government in this, from my point of view. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just picking up on a couple of points that you've mentioned about culture change and transformation and diversity and inclusion, I suppose it would be good to get Paul's take on things as well from an Australian point of view as to whether employer attitudes have changed as a result of the pandemic and as a result of the challenges in the labour market in Australia as well, because I think that they certainly have in the UK. But yeah, it was just a bit of an opinion fact finding. Thank you, Miguel.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, look, we're not too dissimilar to the UK market. Employers have become more pragmatic about their hiring practices and starting to relax rules around recent work experience and how many qualifications people have got for entry-level roles. So it has changed for the better, which is great. And I think employment services providers are getting smarter about working with employers well ahead of time when they know vacancies are coming up. So almost like a 3 to 6 month lead time so that they can prepare job seekers, not only to motivate them for different types of jobs that they may not have considered in the past, but then to train them, get them some work experience that's relevant, and then help work with that employer to onboard them really well, provide plenty of post-placement support and mentoring, and also work with the employer to get better at training their own teams to mentor job seekers in the job, right? Particularly those who have different cultural issues and barriers. And so that those supervisors, those on-the-ground supervisors, are much better than they used to be at keeping someone engaged and progressing on their own development and using, various funding initiatives to develop these people into full-time and ongoing employees. So one of the mantras that we have in our training at the moment is when we talk to our employment practitioners, we say to them, you should be having a conversation with an employer that says, I will find someone that'll want to be still be here in 12 months' time, right? We're not talking about casual work anymore. We're talking about ongoing permanent work for these people. And so you, as the employer, have to change your own mindset about that as well. And I think the better employers are getting that message. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. We had Kevin with his very patient hand up. Oh, you're on mute, Kevin. I still can't hear Kevin. Can try again? We can't hear you, Kevin. I must admit I had this problem just before I got started. I had to plug these in. I don't know whether you've got any set of these.
No, I can hear you.
You try and fix that, Kevin, or type it in the chat and we'll come back to you. Sorry about that, Kevin. Miguel.
Yes. Yeah, so why don't we talk about apprenticeships a bit? Apprenticeships is, of course, a large topic, and you know a lot about it, and probably tried things already around it. I come from two different cultures. I'm Spanish origin, and I grew up in Germany. So these are two very different approaches towards apprenticeship. One is the German system, the dual education, where apprenticeship is like a great way of getting into the labor market. There's a huge infrastructure behind it that goes back to the Middle Ages. You know all that. So it's a huge capacity in it. In Spain, apprenticeships are equal to the lowest in the food chain of the labor market. It's changing a little bit in some regions, interestingly, in the regions that are best developed. But usually what is done in Spain is that academic achievement on a university, for example, is equaled with success. And then they have a 50% youth unemployment. So these are two extremes of, let's say, how societies and labor markets approach what apprenticeship can do to a young person, but also people in general want to integrate into the labor market. And I've done quite a lot of study visits around this and discussions, and usually it breaks down to looking at systems in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, where this is already kind of well established, and then trying to emulate that and use that in their own country, which usually doesn't work because there is not such a huge infrastructure to support it, and the employers also don't see their role as they would see it in a country with a big tradition of apprenticeships, which is seeing themselves as part of the education system. Employers in Germany see themselves as part of the education system, rather than saying, I expect the education system to fix my skills issues. So I'm not saying that it should be transferred one-on-one, but there are a couple of aspects that I think we can learn from successful dual education systems, which I just wanted to bring up, and then we can discuss it. One is to not mistake apprenticeships for unpaid internships, but to have like to get like even if you don't set up a dual education system with chambers of commerce and a ton of money, I think you need to have a serious approach to apprenticeships. Apprentices are not unpaid workforce, and they are not unqualified, and you don't know what to do with them. They're people who come to learn the job and to show what they can do, and to prove their transversal skills, their attitude, and their learning capacity. And through that, kind of help you to bring them on the job. I think apprenticeships work best if it's not only up to the employer to set it up, but if there is a kind of communication with some type of workers' representation, be it a trade union or something else, can also be self-organized, a voice to the young people, to the apprenticeships. Schools could be involved, training institutes could be involved, and that makes it more successful than if it's just the employer who has to provide that. The state, some kind of labor market overview that knows, okay, these are the skills gaps, this is where apprenticeships should go, this is how they need to develop. So instead of just having a kind of one-on-one view on it of companies offering apprenticeships or work practices, you can make apprenticeship approach part of the overall labor market discussion and perspective. And then I think it's important to focus on those employers that have had positive experience or are having positive experience with apprenticeships, that have tried it, it worked out. Particularly SME, I think, are a strong, have a strong foot, can be a strong partner in this, to have them promote what apprenticeships can do for the company, what it can do for the person who's doing the apprenticeship, and what it can do for the society as a whole, the labor market as a whole. Because it's, I mean, apprenticeships can be a development support for the community. Also for vulnerable groups, also for those that are excluded, for NEET, for people who have family issues, social issues. It can be a catalyst to improve the employability and the quality of life for many people. Also in socially challenged areas, apprenticeships can be strong, as many country examples show. Then you can have the young people self-organize and develop a voice to show what they're doing as apprentices. Sometimes here in Germany, apprenticeships are well regarded, but you don't hear the young people so much. It's more something that employers would talk about, chambers would talk about, the state would talk about, but you don't hear the young people. How do they like it to work as apprentices? Do they get enough money? Do they get by? Do they like it, what they're doing? Do they feel obliged to do it just because they started? Is there a possibility to change? What kind of jobs do they get? How are they treated in the company, etc.? So I think all this communication, keep the communication alive among the actors, is something to promote apprentices. And also, again, it's a change of mindset for those that think that apprentices is a waste of time, to actually show this can do something. Because the majority of apprentices in countries where it works well stay in the companies. They have a job, sometimes for a long time. Not only during the apprenticeship, they stay in the company because they are there for 2-3 years or shorter, but the company knows what kind of people they are, and they like it, of course. They kind of stick to the relationships and the work they do there. Any questions at this point or comments?
I think Adrian's got his hand up, but I'd be really keen to hear from other views on apprenticeships from this group as well. Adrian.
Sorry, just a quick question around what other countries may be doing towards what we find with apprenticeships and placing people from underrepresented backgrounds, sometimes that have got poor literacy and numeracy skills. We find that there's a gap between the expectation and what's required on the apprenticeship is too great, and sometimes that's a barrier to entry to apprenticeships. And I was just wondering if other countries have found a solution to that, or whether the requirements are just different and that's how they make it work.
Well, also there, it's employers are also overwhelmed about this, especially if it's kind of legal background to it of you need to take 3 apprentices on because of the size of your company. And then they don't know how to set it up, so they tend to set it up, have too high expectations, kind of equal it to someone who is kind of fully educated. So also there, employment services can help design the apprenticeships in line with what the skills requirements are. It's from my point of view, apprenticeships are not so much about the skills only, but about the attitude, how to change an attitude towards, or to adjust, or to enrich an attitude towards working life, and which role it plays in the larger context of your life. And I think for that, employment services can be a kind of good sparring partner to just sit down with the employer and say, okay, this what would you like to achieve? What are you looking for? And what can we realistically expect from a 16-year-old coming in, trying to do their best, but maybe not having the skills that you would expect. So I think preparing it well is one approach, and those countries that don't have a huge dual education system, like some Scandinavian countries, even in Latin America, where there is a huge informality market and people do have skills but they're not certified, is to really approach it by sitting down and looking individually at cases and vacancies, and then deciding what could be the best fit. Sounds a bit generalistic, but it's basically talking about what is, like, not assuming that this profile will work out, but see what is realistic.
Mm-hmm.
What other views have we got on apprenticeships from this group? Anyone want to offer anything? Or can I share something just to, because I totally see the advantages and the benefits for both businesses and the apprentice, but I think we've also got a problem in this country about perceptions of apprenticeships. And I was talking to the director for lifelong learning, employability, careers and skills, I think it was the job title, yesterday at one of our largest local authorities in the UK. And they were having challenges in attracting particularly young people to apprenticeships, and having employers buy in to the process of apprenticeships as well. And I wonder whether that's, well, I'm sure it's multifaceted and there's lots of things going on here, but I wonder whether it's still a kind of an old perception of from an employer's perspective, right, this is more admin, I'm going to have to deal with this, I have to deal with that, I'll lose them. Could be wrong, of course, this perception. But for young people as well, I worry about whether or not they are perhaps needing to look a bit more short term and thinking with an apprenticeship wage and a cost of living crisis, and they have their own bills and things to think about in life. Do we need to rethink some of this stuff around apprenticeships? How can we make this more attractive to both the business and the potential apprenticeship person? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is, what if we didn't kind of look at apprentices as a kind of pre-stage to having a proper job, but part of it. Why don't we see what someone can do on a job, and maybe it doesn't need to take 2 or 3 years before they do something that is considered productive, but maybe earlier than that. So finding ways of including young people, let's say, it can be also people that are changing jobs and do apprenticeships then. But why don't we find ways of including everybody in a job when they are ready to, and if that's quicker than an apprenticeship framework foresees, then you can also pay them more money quicker. And so just make the system a little bit more flexible, as in putting people in the place they can be when they can be, instead of investing too much money up front and waiting for them to be ready. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's really interesting. We've got some points in the chat as well, if it's all right to read out people's points. They're very welcome to come in, of course, but Adrian mentions that they're still fighting against mainstream education that still values university over apprenticeships. Craig asks, has the apprenticeship levy eroded the concept of an apprenticeship for a young person, with providers targeting higher level, more senior staff for commerciality?
Yeah, good thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah.
As for the academic, considering university degrees a better choice than apprentices, I mean, there are many things you can do there. One is look at the labor market figures. Usually those countries with a lot of apprenticeship systems, they end up in good jobs, they end up at good jobs, and they're also not necessarily worse paid. A lot, of course, needs to be done with the mindset of parents already in school. Parents thinking that it's better to send your child to university, even if the child is not really ready to do that, or will not be successful. So I think already in schools and with the parents, there can be also some work to be done to help make apprenticeships more attractive. And there are also a couple of hybrid approaches already where it's universities, but with a strong apprenticeship, a strong practical focus. Spain, for example, of all countries, is having quite interesting approaches there in the Basque Country, for example, where universities offer apprenticeship-driven careers where you would kind of work in a company or in a factory and kind of do jobs that where you have an academic view on, but you also learn to do them, and then you have better chances on the labor market.
Can you hear me now, Tony?
Hey, you're here, Kevin.
Kevin's back, yeah.
Maybe it fits with the last point that I was going to share from an international perspective, but I've always found over the last 20, 30 years, and I'm not sure how much better it gets, is that I still find supply and demand at the kind of macro level disconnected, and employers will shift their thinking clearly based on need, as they currently do now. And one of the things that Saudi, interestingly, is working on is it's moving away from, like central commissioning organizations like a DWP or a DWAR in Australia to create sector ministries. And the sector ministries are to create a whole ecosystem change model inside where you own the funding for facilitating change, but the actual policy and legislation is devised by industry and intermediaries being at the table to address many of the things that we're talking about in this conversation. So the idea is that we're developing an apprenticeship program rather than it being a solution outside from a different government department. What added value does it have for the economic and business impact in terms of what we do? And how do we think about education within that and how it fits and how it becomes part of a systemic change model? So it'll be interesting how that goes over the next couple of years as they do that, because we do this in a very fragmented way, in my view, still globally, and I think when I started in this industry, I'm not sure how much more advanced we are. And the employers that I speak to still will always talk about where's the business case. I don't hear an intelligent conversation that says this is how an apprenticeship can be designed in a different way, as Miguel's saying. Here's the business case evidence of good practices. People have that in pockets and have it in conversations, but we don't locus it in a more strategic way is my concern. So we end up chipping away around the edges as individual organizations, and we do some great stuff. But I think central government within that has got a role to play, or devolved government as well, looking at it in a kind of more holistic way. So it'll be interesting to see how some of these new ideologies roll out over the next few years.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the strategic view on it is important. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if there are any more questions, I'm happy to hear them. Otherwise, I would go over to the last point that I wanted to talk about, which is service integration. That's a more kind of process question, but I included it because I when I work with employment services that want to engage more with employers, set up some type of infrastructure to service employers, it often comes in as a kind of pilot. Let's do more with employers, and then they don't integrate it into their service. So I think it makes sense as an employment service to look at the whole design of the service pathway you have, and then identify at which points is the employer engagement coming in. Ideally throughout the whole process, but on which kind of points, service points of your delivery chain is employer engagement particularly important. And I think it needs to start at the top level, strategic level. If you are setting the strategy for your employment service, it's good to include employer engagement at that level already. Not only the service to job seekers and then at some point find out that you also need the employers, but to have someone at the top level of your company, of your strategy that is responsible or thinks about employer engagement and how that can be developed and delivered. So it needs to be coherent, the employer strategy. And for that, it can include all kinds of thoughts, like, for example, what Kevin just mentioned, that you need maybe to have a sector approach. If you are employment services servicing employers, are you servicing everybody who comes in and says, I have a vacancy, or are you targeting specific sectors, specific sizes? I'm not sure how you and the different employment services that you represent work, but certainly with a lot of public employment services I work with, they don't have the capacity to become an HR department for all employers that would like to have that, but they have to kind of focus their limited capacity to certain clients. Of course, you don't turn down employers if they want to, but since this is more like a proactive work and you need to approach employers also to get a certain coverage, it would be good to have a certain idea of and priority of which employers might be those that we can help best because they're looking for things that employment services can provide. Not all of them do. And who are maybe those that have the highest chance for integrating those clients that we have as an employment service, and where is the development potential for that? There are some bottlenecks, of course, but in fact, I think it's then also good to look at what kind of services do we want to offer. What's the service? The service is not only saying this is our website, put the vacancy on and we send you some CVs, but there is a whole service chain. I mean, you know that better than me, but the question is, what do you want to offer? You want to offer vacancy registration only? You want to offer them build the vacancy? We talked about job carving. You want to offer seeking functions if they don't find anybody because there is a gap of skills. Will you help them find someone else with similar skills? Will you help the employers branch out to other pools of job seekers where they would normally not recruit from? What about subsidies? I know that that's rather a kind of government idea, but what can you offer them? Is there some kind of incentivation that you offer? Do you offer, many employment services offer mediation between, like, for example, for people, persons with disability, if they get a job, then there would be a mentor or someone who mediates from the employment service to help them get on the job, to check in also after half a year, not only in the first couple of weeks, how is it going? And even in preparation, there's in France, for example, they do something called duo days, which is having people with a disability who are qualified to work for a specific job, and before they actually start a job or the employer is considering taking them on, having them work there for a while, and with someone of the employment service kind of helping, mediating, checking out how that works, and then having someone also in the company that can overtake this mentorship then once they get the job. That's of course requires some investment and capacity, but that's something that to consider when integrating employer engagement into your service portfolio. And then there are things, of course, like job fairs for employers, helping with interviews and whatever you wanna offer there. So I think also there needs to be a cultural change of having and recognizing that employment services is services to employers too. And even if it's not explicitly mentioned in the contracts, or even if it's not part of the procurement package, I think within the service portfolio of your employment service, you should have employer engagement in kind of as a kind of cross-cutting service. And just to finish up on that, I noted a couple of basic questions. Once you have established that and you want to evaluate it, because of course the question to how to integrate employer engagement in your service is then the next question is how I'm going to evaluate whether that's going to work, how does that pay off for me, etc. So the basic questions I noted out is because maybe I need to say that before, no matter how sophisticated data management is on the data you would get on your employer engagement and the sources you have, they usually break down to three things. That's kind of the experience I made throughout the years I work with that. And that's your own business process data, like contacts with employers, whatever employers put on your system, whatever you document that you're doing with employers, that will be a kind of data source for you to later evaluate. Then you have higher level external data that you could use, of course, the kind of labor market things or macro data on employers. And then you have surveys. You can ask employers when they're working with you, are you satisfied with us? And I think in the UK there's quite a lot of surveying of employers, which can be mined. And then there are more advanced techniques like benchmarking, randomized control design, etc. But that's kind of the next level. But if you look at that data and you want to evaluate that data to see and decide whether your employer engagement is successful, I found out that the following questions might help. One is, to what extent the indicators that you would be using for that evaluation are actually controlled by your staff or organizational unit or whatever, in which, like, can you do you get the data, and do you can you do something with the data, and are you basically owning that data? Because in my experience, a lot of evaluation issues come from the fact that people are go crazy with data. They start throwing it around, and in the end of the day, it's not the data you need, or it's not the data you own. It's not the data that you can interpret. Then it's maybe interesting to also look at the resources that different staff members that you ask to evaluate will have to work with data, which skill sets, and and whether the targets that you set or KPIs that you set are transparent and understandable enough, especially the sub-targets for everybody in your employment service to work with. If you work with sectors, how does that break down to sectors, type of employers, available job seekers, and then also make transparent, is it transparent how that feeds back into the overall employer engagement strategy? So there was a kind of more a bit like a theory wrap up of this. Just in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is if you have employer engagement as a kind of target of your employment service, it's important to integrate it fully into the service, not as a standalone or a kind of pilot or fancy lab. And secondly, find relevant data to evaluate it. That's all I had to say for now. Happy to discuss.
Has anyone got any questions on the third point that Miguel was making there, or any questions? Feel free to unmute or raise your hand. One of the comments you made there, which I jotted down immediately, was this: if you're doing employer services, you've got to think about services to employers, and I think it's such an important point. I would probably categorize the usual audience on these employer engagement forums as people who work within the employer engagement function of employability programs, but of course I would suggest that group of people is in the minority for the wider sector and organizations, because of how the policy and service design works, base their services fundamentally around the individual, fundamentally about that individual job seeker. And certainly through Joe's research and some of the research that she and I have done together over the years, it's policymakers don't always think about employer services as part and parcel as important in moving a long-term unemployed person into work. And I think that's a fundamental problem, isn't it, in terms of like how the system is set up, that many of the people on this call, as part of their wider organizations, have retrofitted services around an employability program to make sure that some of the the labor demand side is considered. And I think that that's still an issue, certainly in the UK, where we need to get both UK and devolved policymakers to understand that the ultimate end user of these programs are employers. So why they're not at the table, why they're not helping to design some of this stuff. And I'm not saying this is in all cases, of course. I know that there are pockets of good practice, but I don't think it's in the main. That's just something that really jumped out from what you said.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, they should be involved more for sure. One thing that I would be interested in is if you are using employer engagement already as an integral part of your services, how do you measure? Do you measure how successful that is? Do you have indicators to see whether the things you're doing to engage employers are working out?
Miguel's interviewing the audience here. Who's going to answer? What KPIs maybe, or what how do you measure success of what you do? Come on, who's going to be brave and step in?
I think, Miguel, certainly from my experience, it probably varies from provider to provider and dependent on what type of program that they're running. So, for example, if it's a straight up employability program or a DWP commissioned program, then that provider will be targeted by how many people they move off a caseload into employment. And that again will vary vastly dependent on the provider, what part of the country they're in, and what type of employability program. But I suppose, again, in my experience, it is quite internal. So it's measured by the provider in terms of what their performance is. I'm not entirely sure how much it would be measured by an employer, for example, unless they were presented by the information from the provider at the end of a month, for example, to say, did you know that we moved 17 people from our program into your employment? So I think it's probably quite a wide and varied.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's often a challenge also to get the information from the employer, isn't it? Like sometimes there might be a lot of things happening to engage employers. Then there is successful recruitment, but then you never hear of the employer again. So the question is, did it work out? How successful are they? Then you can run surveys, of course. The response rate is sometimes not great. So there is a challenge there to find, if you don't have a kind of constant conversation with or some type of setup where you meet with the employer regularly, which I think is a good idea as well. But of course, not always possible because of capacity. If then the employer just disappears into thin air, and then you don't know whether your service worked out or not.
I think there's something to be said as well, just to touch upon Tony's point there and the point that Kevin made about what's happening in Saudi Arabia, about employers being more involved in the process. So obviously when we had the introduction of the apprenticeship levy in the UK, it completely changed and transformed an entire sector about how young people were trained, about how employers engaged with people, about how employers selected their own training providers to deliver services. And again, people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see that happening whole scale when it comes to employing people who are unemployed, or people who are deemed as long-term unemployed, or people who are deemed as not in education or training. I don't see that type of kind of whole-scale change happening. So again, it may be that there needs to be more of a measured approach from the government in terms of how employers engage with providers to move people into work.
Yeah, I think government involvement is important there. Also, to design procurements and contracts in a way that it kind of includes that. Also, employer engagement in general could be an indicator, like a social value indicators. Could be also how do you engage with employers. And I think as for apprenticeships, we briefly mentioned it already, but I think if there were forms of giving more voice to young people who do apprenticeships and liked it, and employers who take on apprentices, if there was a little bit more kind of best practices, sometimes a big word, but or testimonials coming from bottom up, saying this is how it worked out for us, that would maybe help. I think it's a bit undercovers the apprenticeship system in many countries. It kind of works, or sometimes doesn't work too well, but people don't talk too much about it.
It was interesting, Miguel, just on numbers, when you talk about the role of government, which is interesting, because I don't see it in many commissions. But the Middle East government did commission a sector-based program about 18 months ago, which was targeted at 6 sectors to drive 120,000 people into those growth sectors as they wanted. And a key requirement when they put the tender out was a whole series of analysis around the employer engagement and a mandate that the funding was spent on account managers. It was spent on account managers for industry. First time I've seen a funded program of that level. Which needed integrated into a job seeker service delivery model, don't get me wrong, and it was a lot of online technology as well for bulk interviewing on online careers fairs models. But they stipulated breakdowns to do with demographics of who got the job salaries that were there, the interaction that went on with key account managers, sustainability indicators. So it started, I think, to drive the behaviors of the marketplace to think differently about evaluating. So evaluation became a key part of the program. It actually exceeded its numbers. But what was more important is that they wanted to get the learning and extract that out from the employer piece. So I do think there's a way of doing this better, and government's clearly a part of that. Because most employer engagement functions I would come across globally will measure the standard indicators of, conversion rates, sustainability rates, vacancy, how many vacancies, types of vacancies. It doesn't really get into that, nor is there a monthly review with those key accounts to look at the kind of real business case of benefit and saying, well, okay, sustainability is great at 70%. How do we make it 80% together? What can we change inside the company together? So it's that dialogue that needs to move up to the next level, and we're not focused enough on that demand side still, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah, any more comments or questions?
Just checking the chat. Yeah, there's a few comments in the chat about what gets measured. And it reflects what Kevin's just said as well.
Opportunity source, job outcomes. Yeah, very good. Okay.
I think there's from my perspective, there's too much emphasis on on certain governments seeking out negative feedback about this sector. And
I think we might be losing you a little bit, Paul.
You know, like interviewing or
the
listening to.
Paul, your audio is in and out at the moment.
I
don't know whether you can hear me. Your audio is kind of in and out, so we're not really picking up what you're saying.
I'll try again, and then I'll give up if it still doesn't work.
That's a bit better. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so in my experience, a lot of governments focus on the negative. Employers complaining about this service.
Getting a bit of it, Paul. Paul, turn your video off. See if that helps with your audio, because I'm desperate to hear this point finished now.
Asking complainers. They love to listen to the complainers, so I just think they need to change their mindset.
I think we got the most of that point, actually. Well, yeah, about there's a negative kind of, or sorry, there's a focus on getting the negative viewpoints in and the critique, rather than perhaps capturing the best practice and disseminating that. I know that's not necessarily what you said, Paul, but that's what I'm picking up from the snippets of audio that I'm getting coming through. Any other questions or comments for Miguel?
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Miguel, if I can speak on behalf of this group, thank you so much for giving up your time and your insights. It's really interesting, incredibly valuable, and if I'm honest, I think we can all benefit from looking outside of our own kind of bubble and try and work out what's going on well in different parts of the world, but also to kind of understand that some of the challenges are shared as well. Yeah, by working across different territories and understanding different processes and trying new things, I think we'll in the aggregate, we're going to improve things both in the UK and beyond. So, Miguel, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're nearly at the end of our session, but I wanted to have just a couple of minutes, just a few minutes with this group. We've told you a little bit about what's coming up in terms of future employer engagement forums. So we're going to be looking at employer charters and employer kite marks, quality marks, whatever you call them. That's one of the themes that people are interested in talking about. But we're really keen on understanding how else this forum is going to meet the needs of this community. It was set up originally to try and share best practice, to try and connect people who are often working in silos, to try and get the whole aspect of employer engagement across the UK in a better place. And we think and we hope that is happening. But I want to get some feedback, and you can put it in the chat, you can email me afterwards, or you can email ERSA. But what other themes or subjects or content would you like to see in these employer engagement forums in the future? So have a think about that, or start typing, or feel free to come in. One of the things that we talked about already was having a session on job carving, which I think is a really interesting thing that we can look at. Picking up on Miguel's question, we could potentially look at, well, how are we actually measuring success? What are the best practices across different providers and across different programs? There's a potential conversation we could have there about what works well. But in order to make this really relevant to the organisations and people in this community, can you please provide us some feedback on other things you want to cover? Or perhaps you'd like to even showcase what you think is a really good example of how you're operating things in, for example, I'll pick on Adrian, that kind of inclusive recruitment model. Shall we have a showcase on that? Shall we go into the detail of how that's kind of rolled out and how that's worked and the challenges that have been overcome? Sorry to put you on the spot there, Adrian, but I was really interested when you were talking about it. So
happy to support on that in future. No problem at
all.
all.
Oh, nice one. Thank you, Adrian. And you'll be aware that Fern is getting more and more involved with these forums as well. So maybe that's a conversation between the three of us for the next one. Kevin, thank you very much. I'm interested in technology and AI to enhance the employer offer. That is a lovely, juicy subject. Let's definitely put that on the list, and I'll scratch my head for a while and think about what that what that looks like. Maybe Chat GPT can help me work out what that session will look like. If you guys haven't looked at Chat GPT, can I just suggest that's the rest of your Wednesday? It's amazing. What other things would you like to see in this forum? I'd like to see more people sort of coming together and talking about stuff, if I'm honest. It's wonderful to have expert guest speakers like Miguel. I think we could do more together as well. Also, some richer evidence-based examples of what really works in other markets. Nice, thank you, Kevin. It's very useful. Voices and comments from others would be helpful as well. If you don't think of it now, ahead, then you can feed that back directly to me, or you can send it through to ERSA, and we'll put that into a plan of different themes and conversations that we'll have within this forum. Again, it's because we want to make it targeted and useful as possible to all of you guys. So feel free to suggest stuff, or I'll pick on people like Adrian. So if in terms of wrap up, again, I'm going to thank Miguel and also all the questions and the comments from the people here today. Remember, we've got the book launch on the 7th of March. That's also a date for when we're running the expert forum on 50 plus. So please, if you're interested in that from a kind of employer engagement perspective, please get in touch and say you want to get involved, or please promote that to colleagues who might be working in this space. And then on the 5th of April, we've got our follow-up employer engagement forum as well, when I hope that we're going to be looking at the employer quality marks. So if anyone has got anything else to say before we wrap up, please put your hand up or come in right now. All turned your videos off, so I only assume that you're making tea in the background, or I hope you're not making faces at me. If that's everything, then thanks to ERSA colleagues, thanks Miguel, thank you for the other people who contributed and asked questions and made comments. We'll pick up all the comments that are in the chat as well, in case we've missed anything. But I hope you have a fantastic Wednesday, and I'll see you at the next one. Take care for now.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Thank
Tony.
you, Tony.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks,
Thanks.
Miguel.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheerio for now.